Hello and welcome to the Tifo Football podcast. I'm Ruben Pinder, and today I'm joined by JJ Bull.
Hello.
And John Mackenzie.
Yo, yo.
And Steve in the booth.
Hello!
To talk about many things. What was on the docket this week, as Joe calls it? Are we giving Liverpool enough flowers? And, more specifically, which kind of flowers should we send them? We talked about that. We talked about how many different players can Arsenal play as a striker before the season is out. Somebody mentioned Calafiori yesterday, and I think that's mental, but sounds fun.
I think that would kind of work, yeah.
Yeah. The Nico Gonzalez era arrives at Man City, or is it the Nico Gonzalez, Trent Alexander-Arnold, Ange Postecoglou, Trippier era? We discussed that and what we should call him by name and just how good he is. Tottenham beat Manchester United, but everyone who watched that game lost deep down. And then we played Points Are Bad, where I step in as Joe and Steve has to be Seb. And also, we're doing a live show. I don't know if I'm doing a live show, but these guys are doing a live show in the Soho Theatre in Walthamstow on the 24th of May. Are we looking forward to that? That's going to be fun, isn't it?
Looks nice. The lights are up on top of it and everything.
Wonderful. People should buy tickets, shouldn't they, John?
They should. It's in Walthamstow. It's not in Soho.
Not in Soho.
Despite the name of the theatre.
Very confusing. If you go to Soho instead of Walthamstow, we will not do another one for you.
Throw in the corner from the Nando's.
Very helpful. The Nando's.
Yeah.
Great. So the link for buying tickets to that show will be in the description to this episode on audio and video. Enjoy the show. Liverpool 2, Wolves 1. I'm not going to do Joe's silly way of saying scores. Liverpool still top, still going well, other than a few officiating nonsense that we're not going to talk about first. I feel like maybe we haven't given them their flowers this season for just how consistently and quietly they've gone about their business, and they remain top. They're very good, aren't they, JJ?
Yes.
Yeah.
I agree. I feel like they have gone under the radar a bit, even by us even. Don't know why that is. It feels efficient rather than like...
Yeah.
I think when Klopp was there, it felt more emotional and it's easier to buy into it. And now it feels... I don't know why it is, but it feels a little bit less that, more clinical and cleaner.
Is it like that maybe there's less of an individual narrative, like other than Salah having an outrageously efficient season, because we're so used to
I think
that?
there is just less of a narrative. Generally, it's just less of a story, like a fairy tale. It's more like, here's a guy with some really good players who's making them play well, and they're doing things, and they're good at all parts of the game.
And there's no new players either to like attach that narrative to, that explanation, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I hadn't thought that either. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I don't know what you think, John.
Yeah, I think the context is like tough to get to grips with, because this season has been, and I know, I understand that Liverpool fans are annoyed about the fact that people use City dropping away and Arsenal having a weird start to the season as an excuse to not talk about how good Liverpool are, and obviously Liverpool are good. But yeah, I think that it's sort of hard to judge what level they're at, because it feels as though they haven't really been challenged this season, at least in the title race.
But isn't that because they've been so good against the teams who are challenging them? Because I remember thinking, well, the tough games are coming up, and then he just walked through it all.
Yeah, no, and look, you can only beat who's in front of you, or whatever the old adage is, and they've been very good. No denying that whatsoever. And I think if we're going to talk context, we need to talk about the context of they brought in a new manager as well. There's an Opta-Joe tweet that says Liverpool won 60 points in 25 Premier League matches under Arne Slot. The only manager in the competition's history to win more points through his first 25 matches is Jose Mourinho. So, which is obviously impressive. But I think it speaks maybe more to the fact that I think generally when new managers come in, there's usually much higher chance of there being a bad transition period, because clubs don't really do succession planning very well. So I think a big part of the impressiveness of what has happened here is the fact that Liverpool have managed to move on a dynastic coach, bring in a new coach, and it feels like they've not missed a beat, even though they're playing quite a different style of football to the style of football that Jurgen Klopp was playing. So for me, I think this is a real, it should be a real celebration of Liverpool's back room, as well as what they're doing on the pitch. But yeah, I do think that it's sort of tough to judge what level they're at in terms of, if Arsenal hadn't had those red cards at the beginning of the season, and then the injuries that they've got now, same with City losing Rodri and some of the problems they've had. I think that there would be much more talk of Liverpool if they were being successful within that context of a bit more of a rigorous title challenge. But yeah, like you can only judge them on the back of what they've achieved this season. What they've achieved this season is really impressive, I think.
I suppose because maybe you expect a drop off after Klopp leaves, and they haven't really had one. That is kind of like the equivalent of like a new manager bounce being disguised in kind of like a very gradual line. So it's not such a steep spike, but they've just quietly got a bit better or stayed as they were. And in most title races, there's always context like that, right? Like there's always teams who drop off and everything. So to kind of mitigate their achievements like that feels somewhat unfair a little bit.
It's almost like they kind of like to get back to where they are now. They had to have that like rocket in the fire and the energy to, come out of mid-table to get to be one of the best teams in the world. And so like the natural progression from there is to like chill out a little bit and just go into cruise control. Not that sounds wrong saying cruise, but so you take Klopp out, you take all the emotion and the fire and the passion out of it, and you put someone who's just makes them a bit more chill and more thoughtful about things that they're doing possibly. And again, I'm not saying he's not thoughtful about it, but it may be the natural progression or evolution of those players in that team to then take those players, because I think there's only so long you can play at full intensity before you run out of energy.
Especially with the ages of the key ones, right?
I guess so, yeah. And it's like a power up in a video game, like if your energy level runs down, you have to wait for it to recharge a bit and go. So you can't always do that. And you see it with certain teams, they rely on intensity. Like Newcastle this weekend just couldn't get the ball off Man City. And if you're not fully intense, it doesn't work. So like there's probably something in that they're a bit calmer, but they can be intense when they want to be rather than all the time. That's maybe what the players wanted as well. Players maybe want to change now and again. Again, not saying they want rid of Klopp, but like just having something different is probably naturally what they needed to make them perform at this
tempo. I think
level
is important, right?
Yeah.
And there's a lot of teams this season who I think have dropped off because of the required level of tempo in the Premier League right now. And again, this is context. The fact that Slot has been able to manage the players' intensity has led to them not having as many injuries, right? And so therefore being more competitive. So that's another aspect in which I think Slot deserves praise. There's also more context as well in that, this Liverpool side 2 seasons ago, basically went through the same sort of decline that Man City have gone through this season. They completely rebuilt their midfield. And last season they had a sort of bedding in period for that midfield. They brought in Slot at a point where the squad is like perfect at that point in their physical cycle, and I think that's really important as well. And again, this all comes back to this. I think we just don't have enough of a holistic view of success in football terms. I think when something like Liverpool this season happens, the tendency is to be like, oh, it must be all down to the coach, and a lot of it is down to the coach, but a lot of it is down to like the process and the cycles and stuff that you just wouldn't ever think of just coming good at the right point in time. And I think that's again why Liverpool as a football club deserve to be, I think, celebrated for that, because I think and City have done it in the past as well. We've seen other big teams do that, but like Liverpool right now, they seem to have everything in the process just set up to reduce the possibility of things going wrong. Football is just a game of probabilities at the end of the day, and I think Liverpool have done everything in their power to make sure that they've reduced the possibility of things going wrong, and they're really benefiting from that now.
The other thing, I was thinking this on the weekend, which sounds a bit stupid, but like if you're looking at how the tactics make a team better or players better, whatever, often it's not the tactics, it's the individual players in it, because you can have exactly the same setup and the same training sessions during the week, but if you have Mohamed Salah and Virgil van Dijk and Szoboszlai doing things that they do individually, it's not tactical what you make them do, it's what they do as players. They're all so individually brilliant. And if you put someone less good than Van Dijk in Van Dijk's place, they would be less good. Which is a really smart, highbrow way of looking at football. But like when you have those players, I mean, they are like Salah and Van Dijk absolutely are amazing this year. Like Salah is, what his numbers are, like I can't believe how good it is. I didn't even notice it till I looked at it last week. And so when you have that, you don't need to have too much else going on, because you've got like a game breaker who's consistently winning games for you.
Yeah, it's like ensuring that the tactics that are implemented succeed way more often than they might with an average.
Yeah, it's really easy to be a manager if you've got that sort of thing, because you just put a system in place which will roughly work, because there's only so many formations you can have. Really, you can't put them all on the left wing, you can't put them all on the right wing.
Real Madrid tried to put everyone on the left wing. It doesn't work.
They have tried that. It doesn't work. You can't do that.
But yeah, the injury thing even more impressive this season because it's such an outlier compared to a lot of their competitors. And it was part of the reason that they hired Slot. And it goes down to like longer, less intense sessions and lots of sports sciencey stuff that like obviously everybody does, but they seem to be doing it better than everyone. And of course, that comes with a little bit of luck that they haven't had the freak injuries that, like an ACL tear that you can't really mitigate for. But all that said, they did go an entire half without registering a single attempt on goal against Wolves.
Was that the second half?
Yeah. Are they wobbling? Are the wheels coming off? No, because they won, obviously. No. But it's worth considering that the form from the first half of the season is not always good. That's not going to be sustainable, right, for the entire year.
I think as all fellow Football Manager players will attest, what happens in seasons like this when you're really good is that you lose a random game in the FA Cup because you rested a bunch of players and put some kids on, and then you have a couple of results where they're kind of close. Because they're the Everton game as well. Remember that happened?
Yeah, and they lost to Plymouth Argyle.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
So exactly what
they lost to Plymouth in the Cup, and then they had that tough game against Everton, and then they had this against Wolves when they weren't that great in the second half. I don't think pressure will get to them, but I think they'll have a little dip, and then they'll come out of that probably towards the end of February, then they'll just steamroll it towards the end of the season.
So I actually looked into this I was thinking maybe there was a short in the topic of like, what do most title-winning teams do if you compare them first half of the season to second half of the season? And the answer is there's not really any correlation with anything. Some teams do better.
How long did that take you to get there?
Yeah, well, but what I think was quite kind of interesting is there was like really soft correlation between Manchester City tend to be better in the second half of the season than they do in the first half of the season, which I think is a bit of an outlier compared to what happened before, which was a lot of teams would have a good first half of the season and then sort of drag themselves over the line in the second half. I do remember the Conte Chelsea season where they got like a nice head of steam at the beginning of the season. They changed their formation up, and then if you look through the second half of the season, it's just 1-0 wins against like West Brom.
They won like 13 games in a row or something.
That's right. After they changed the formation, I think it was 13 games. But in the second half, it's all just like 1-0, sort of dragging themselves over the line. And I think that was maybe the reality a little bit more in the Pep Guardiola era. I know Pep was
his first season.
Yeah. But now it very much seems as though the likelihood of winning the Premier League is much more likely to be based on whether or not you have a good solid second half of the season. So it could be interesting to see.
That's what United did with Alex Ferguson, right? So they were always much better in the second half of the season. It felt inevitable, like an extension of Fergie time within a game.
It helped that they just let them play until they scored. But
that was beneficial, yeah. But that's definitely a thing.
Not really, just a joke like on Top Gear.
I feel like they often dragged themselves through games, United, when they were winning everything.
Less so now, but we'll come to that later. Liverpool scored a penalty in this game, won another goal from Mohamed Salah. And John, you posted something interesting on Twitter about penalties maybe being a more generous reward for the fouls that they draw. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Does the punishment fit the crime? Found it interesting.
On average in the Premier League, you're likely to score 4 out of 5 penalties. It's 80% hit rate. Pretty much. So, yeah, that's an XG for a penalty is 0.8. Almost all of the penalties that you will ever take probably won't be punishing a scenario where you are going to generate a chance of that high quality, because it's very hard to generate a chance of that high quality. For example, James Maddison's goal yesterday, the tap-in against Man United, was given around the same percentage likelihood of scoring as a penalty. So, that's a very high chance, high quality of a chance. So I guess there's always been like that tension in penalty kicks that the reward generally outweighs the situation that you're trying to stop by fouling.
The context is important, so I think what we mean is like if you are shielding the ball in the corner of the box, like away from the goal, and then you go down and win a penalty in the very corner where it's right on the line. That's not really a chance to score. And
no, but the point I'm making, I suppose, is that even when it's like a clear-cut penalty, generally speaking, you're more likely to score the penalty than you are the situation that you're in, right? So that's the context we're starting off with penalties. Like they are a reward for being fouled in a scenario. But I think that there's a number of scenarios where, like JJ's mentioned one there. Is there anything worse than watching your team play when someone's dribbling out of the box and they're on the corner of the penalty box running out and someone clips them and then gives away a penalty, which goes from a really unthreatening situation to you're more likely to score this than not.
So this was Luis Diaz clipped the ball round. Who's in goal for Wolves? Jose Sarr. Yeah, and he was never going to keep it in. Like it feels a bit weird to say that, given that he's gone down, so the ball then looks miles away from him. But I think in so many of those scenarios, the attacker is never keeping it in.
Yeah,
and so more keepers should pull out of those challenges, and because the attacker is waiting for contact, he's going down regardless. Let him fall over, look silly. VAR.
They do it all the time, and as long as their foot hits the goalie, they get the foul every time.
Like the other one with Jota, where he just,
I'm so glad that was so good that he got. Did he get booked for that?
I'm not sure.
He should have done.
Booked, but
it's just cheating, just throwing your legs out.
He's done similar before against Palace, but I'm not here to moralise about simulation, but it does happen.
Yeah, and I think in these situations, the ones that we're talking about, essentially all you need to do is just make sure that you move the ball away from the scenario and then take the contact.
Yeah, Rooney did it all the time.
There's no sense in which you're going to actually regain control of the ball after that scenario, and so it does seem as though you're not really getting any sort of tangible. You're not losing any sort of tangible benefit, so it does raise questions about that. But I mean, I tweeted this yesterday, and there was lots of interesting solutions to this problem. Maybe it's just the reality of the game that you have to take that. There's lots of people saying Jose Sarr has to make the decision not to go for that, knowing that he probably will give away a penalty. But
you have to go for it as goalkeeper.
It's tough, isn't it? But, and I suppose you can say that that's not a high quality chance. Generally speaking, but if the keeper doesn't go for it and he gets the shot off, then I guess it is quite a high quality chance, and that's what you're being punished for.
If he stays on his line, then it is actually better.
But at the same time, it does seem like a lose-lose scenario for the goalkeeper, because you have to come out to make sure that it's a smaller chance, but then that raises the chance of you giving away a penalty, which then makes it a big chance. So you're damned if you do, and you're damned if you don't. But I don't know. I think there are certain. I think penalties are probably a bit too overpowered now in football.
What if the penalty was from the place where the foul happened?
That's an indirect free kick, isn't it? Or direct free kick, I suppose it would be. In the box.
But there's no wall behind you, so just
a shot from there.
Yeah,
that's fun.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
To be honest, I think everything you said.
I don't know, maybe
everything you said is true. It sounds correct. It's fair, but I do think having that kind of unfairness makes it more fun. Like the loophole of having an attacker who can win a penalty and therefore generate a better chance than he would have had. Has led to a lot of wingers becoming quite prone to diving, which a lot of people don't like. But I think it can be a bit of a leveler for weaker teams if they've got a player who's good at winning penalties.
But do you think
it's how Palace got promoted? That's all I remember.
I agree with you, but I also think that generally speaking, these kind of rules are going to benefit the bigger sides more, right? Just because they have more of the ball, they're in the box more, and it then means that in a game where it's such a low scoring sport, that a penalty like that means. I mean, that took Liverpool from 1-0 to 2-0, and that was basically game over.
And the last one you see is always going to condition which way you sway on that debate, I guess.
Yeah. No, of course. And I just sort of feel as though there's a lot of games where you just sort of think, oh, if a top side gets the penalty, then that's basically job done for them, and they haven't even really had to work very hard for it.
But we're not here to dunk on Liverpool's proficiency at winning penalties. We're here to give them their flowers. What type of flowers should we give them, JJ? Steve Hankey has just written in the script that palm leaves apparently symbolise victory.
Palm leaves flowers? Would you describe palm?
They're leaves, aren't they?
And palm is a tree? Would you
describe leaves?
Just give Arne Slot a big palm tree.
Yeah.
Why do they celebrate victory? Is it because? Why is that?
Isn't it laurels the victory, the winner in
I don't know. I'm not a florist.
Well, laurels aren't really flowers either, I don't think.
Palm leaves symbolise victory with integrity. And meaning reinforced when we look skyward.
Not if they're winning penalties like that.
We're not giving them any flowers.
Well, there we go.
I don't know much about flowers.
I like going to the garden centre and getting flowers. I like doing that. I've got loads of plants. Plants aren't flowers though, are they?
I don't know.
You seem like a big houseplant guy.
I've got a few houseplants. I like them. I kill them a lot by accident because I love them too much.
My mum gave me a spider plant once and said it would be really difficult for you to kill this through neglect, but I still managed it.
Especially when it's scurrying around the floor with all its legs.
Yeah, and it makes me jump on the sofa every time I see it.
Exactly.
My dad has a big collection of cacti.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and they're quite hard to manage.
Do you have to water cacti?
Yeah, but he has very specific rules about it. He uses eyedroppers and stuff and gives them very.
Yeah.
No, that is the way to look after them, because I have a cactus that I don't think I've ever watered it. Is it alive?
Do you
I don't know.
Do you starve it for ages and then drown it and it
I just forget it's there because it's on a shelf. But
it doesn't really. They don't really look like plants either, isn't it? It just looks like an ornament. So
yeah, like a toy.
You don't need to water your ornaments, so why would you water your cactus? But
yeah.
apparently you do need to, and he repots them very regularly. He's a big believer in repotting.
Listen,
there you
fair
go.
play.
So what flowers are we giving them? Like we should come up with an answer for this. What's a bonsai tree? Is that a plant?
That's a tree.
That's a nice little tree, yeah.
I want to give them a tree so their roots may
Lilies.
grow strong and tall.
I feel like lilies are often given as victory.
Is it a bit late to give them
flowers
roses?
do they give? Flowers in the
No, you can give them roses.
Olympics.
Valentine's Day last week.
It was Valentine's Day last week.
Yeah.
That's good.
5 key flowers were well. When was this? Apparently there was 5 different. The 1996 Atalanta Games.
Great year.
There were 5 different flowers given to the winners to echo the 5 Olympic rings, including sunflowers, celosia, tiger lilies, larkspur, and tuberose, symbolising loyalty, immortality, pride, swiftness, and love, respectively. There you go.
Cool.
That one.
All right, well, let's send some of those to Anfield.
Which one do you want? Loyalty, immortality, pride, swiftness, or love? And I can tell you what you're going to give them.
I want immortality, please, John.
Immortality is celosia. Never heard of it.
Okay.
Do you want to know the difference between plants and flowers?
Yes.
Yeah.
You can have plants that don't flower
Oh.
and then flowering plants. So plants, pretty universal, but then some plants flower, including palm trees.
Okay.
So we can give palm leaves, we can give Liverpool palm leaves
But
as
surely
flowers.
the leaves aren't the flowers, Steve.
So
But is it part of a flowering?
You're working hard to drag yourself
all
out
flowers
of
are
this.
plants.
Absolutely, yeah.
All flowers are plants, but not all plants are flowers.
Exactly.
Yeah, like everyone who voted no.
I've got it. I know what we can do, and then we can move on from it.
Never talk about
Please,
plants
yeah.
again.
We'll give them those palm leaves. They come from palm trees.
Yeah.
We'll give them like hundreds of palm trees to cover the training ground so no one can see the excellent tactics and skills that the manager and the players are doing at the training ground.
Great idea. Moving on, finally, is Liga. Is there still a title race? Arsenal won 2-0 at Leicester with a defensive midfielder up top. Marouane Fellaini's spirit lives on.
Oh, Marino, yes. I think he'd be good at that role because he's got like natural positioning and movement within the box. So I actually think it kind of works. He's got skill set to be good in tight spaces. The thing about Havertz is a player who is actually a bit deeper. He likes to then run in to attack. Except Marino, I'd say, is far more aggressive in the air and has a natural sense of it. And he scored goals for Spain. He did that in the Euros.
The header that he scored against Leicester really reminded me of that header that he scored against Germany.
Yeah. So he's really good at doing that. I've seen him do it multiple times. He's done it for Newcastle in the Premier League. Remember that? He played for them?
I remember him playing there. I don't remember him doing anything good.
Funny career,
He scored
didn't
a goal
he?
against Palace.
Played for
With his
Dortmund
head.
as well, didn't he?
He did play for
It's
Dortmund,
a very
yeah.
odd career that you just don't really think
Yeah.
about.
It means that people knew he was definitely good when he was young and was like destined for a good career because like Dortmund is where you go when you're good and young, right? One of the teams you go to, them or Real Sociedad, where he also went.
He's a very Newcastle kind of player, isn't he?
Yeah, or like a
he was
Benfica
there.
kind of player as well,
Yeah.
I think, that kind of player.
But whether or not Arsenal can continue this run of form with him up front, I'm not entirely.
I think he'd be able to do quite a lot for them. I think it definitely works for now. But you probably want someone who runs in behind as well to give you something different now and again, which is the problem they've had forever anyway, but they don't really have those. Sterling, I've not watched the full Arsenal game against Leicester, apparently he wasn't very good.
Was taken off after 69 minutes for Marino, which moved Trossard from a false 9 position to the left wing, and they had Waneri on the right, and those are like their only fit attackers. And Sterling was apparently very poor.
Trossard's better. He likes going to central areas, but it's definitely better when he starts on the left, I think.
Yeah.
So
Well,
he
that's
can move
where
in there.
the second goal came from.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, do you reckon they might start Marino from
Yes.
a attacking position now,
Yes.
rather than bring him on? Yeah.
I think they'll start him, yeah.
Okay.
I don't know. I'm not convinced. We're talking Leicester City here, right? And it was the majority of Arsenal's XG just came from them picking up those 2 headers. Obviously, Arsenal scoring from crosses from wide areas in headed scenarios is not like, obviously we've seen it happens, but we've also seen it not work out in games, and then those games have been the ones where they've dropped points in. So
I was thinking, the crosses they put in, they're very similar. They do it a lot in games where it's that half space, back far post zone cross. So I just don't think Havertz attacks them. So if you have Marino there, but then the benefit of him being a midfielder is you get the run on it. So that's one of the things against it that might not work. But I think you get more of a target there, so that does benefit them. I don't think they'll play long to him. I don't think he's gonna. I don't think he'd do that. There's too much of like the striker skill set that he won't have developed, even though he probably learned it pretty quickly. And And what was I saying? Raheem Sterling up front? I don't know.
Yeah.
Ranieri's good. I thought Ranieri could be like an amazing false nine, like Messi was for Barcelona. Not as good, maybe.
Yeah, he looks amazing for his age.
Yeah.
Everyone's the same as Messi.
And obviously he's in the team mostly due to injuries, but obviously they're on merit through his ability as well. Lewis Skelly has filled in. They've had to contest with quite a lot of those issues, which has hindered their title race. But how do we analyse how well they've done this season? Like, are they overachieving to be still in with a shout?
It's a funny scenario, isn't it? Because like I think all Arsenal fans would say we've been super unlucky this season. And I think in terms of the officiating, they certainly have. Regardless of whether or not you think the calls that they've had against them were justified or not, they've definitely been unlucky to have such officious referees calling them for things that maybe don't usually get called for. That said, I think there's certain situations where you can argue they have been. Things have gone well within the unluck. This game is a good example of that, right? Where they're struggling to beat Leicester and they managed to pick up a couple of late goals through playing a defensive midfielder as a striker. I'd say that's pretty much as you can hope for in the game like that to go well. And there's been a few other games I think where things have sort of gone their way. I suspect most Arsenal fans will be tearing their hair out hearing me say this because they'll feel as though this has been one of the most frustrating seasons they've had in recent years. But yeah, that's the nature of luck and football, variance and football. That it's not like you have luck and then you have, or you don't have luck. It's that like all of this stuff gets merged and blended in together, and there's an amalgam of things going your way and things going against you. And yeah, often the teams who do well are the ones who have the rub of the green for the longest period. But yeah, I think that things could have gone much worse for Arsenal, given that they could be out of the title race. And they're in it, so
yeah. And the underlying numbers, like their expected goals is 40.1. I think according to FBref, it seems like it's not updated from Wolves and Liverpool on the weekend yet. But so 40.1 XG with goals for of 51 implies it has been a bit of an overperformance. Yeah. They've got the best defensive record in the league, according to expected goals against. I think actually with goals conceded as well. Yes, they have. So they're doing the defensive parts right, and that's what wins you leagues I think historically, or maybe just traditionally. Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah, it is the cliche, isn't it?
I think so.
Attacks when you
look at that. You got to score more goals. They should have bought. I mean, everyone knows they should have bought. They should have someone up front who scores goals.
Havertz tearing his hamstring on a warm weather training trip directly immediately after the window closes is like, it's like as if you scripted a comedy, right? It's so bad. It's such bad timing.
Is there a certain irony that he was blocking a shot as well at the time?
Yeah, Arteta's defensive approach in full flow there. But yeah, so now they're just going to have to deal with that, but they are dealing with it. Arteta's very good at finding solutions to things. He's, changed things up in the past, so we'll see, but feels unlikely.
Yeah, in terms of the title race, it does feel like there is a title race, but at the same time, I think that Liverpool maybe had a little bit of a wobble, and it'll be interesting to see how they sort of pull their way out of that.
The next few fixtures will be interesting.
Yeah, I guess the issue I have with the whole Arsenal thing is that do we see them? I think for Arsenal to really challenge for the title, they have to win all of their remaining fixtures, and like regardless of what we've been talking about now, going into the last 13 games of the season, whatever it is, with a sort of cobbled together front line, it doesn't seem as though they're well placed to be able to actually do that. So
yeah, and it's frustrating timing for Arsenal fans because like last season's Arsenal team without these injuries mounts a much bigger challenge this season. Even the one the season before probably does. That was when Saliba got injured and they fell off a cliff. Yeah. So and it's all timing. But I think I just want to end this Arsenal section. I think the criticism of Arteta there's a lot of kind of proper football man punditry around that suggests that if he doesn't win a trophy this season, as if cups save elite managers anyway, then he's kind of for some reason failed at Arsenal. And I kind of compare this to when Pochettino was at Spurs, and the progress gets completely overwritten because they've set such high standards for themselves that then by not winning a league title, it looks like a failure. When you look at the entire project as a whole, and it's been it's been an undoubted success. They are just now at that final hurdle, and that is the hardest one to get over.
Do you know what's bananas? I just looked at the Premier League table from last season after 25 games, which is what we're on now. Do you remember who's top at this point? You can see my screen.
Yeah.
Do you know who's top?
Was it City?
No, Liverpool.
Yeah.
Oh,
Liverpool
wow.
were top on 60 points, which is exactly what they've got now.
I don't remember.
With
that.
18 games won, 18 wins, 6 draws, 1 defeat. They had 2 defeats because they played 26 games on 60 points.
What was their lead at this point?
They were 4 points ahead of Man City.
Right.
And then Arsenal were third on 55 points. They were on 53 after 25 games this season. Difference being they lost 4 games last season at this point and they've drawn 4. And this season they've drawn every week. 15 wins, 8 draws, 2 losses.
That's too many draws.
Correct.
But I think this is a really good example of like the power of narratives, right? Because people don't think of Liverpool having been in a title challenge last season, and they absolutely were. They fell away right at the end, and there's questions about whether or not their approach was sustainable, which is why everyone is loving the Arne Slot's approach this season. But they absolutely, they probably were a bit too chaotic, but you can get away with it for the course of a season. There's a timeline not that far away where Liverpool actually ended up winning the Premier League last season, and people won't believe it because the way it ended up panning out. But this is why it's so hard to read, as you say. Like, how do you read managers when people want to say that you can only justify your approach if you get a title out of it? So yeah, I do think there's questions with Arsenal and Arteta about the way that Arteta approaches football seems to be trying to reduce variance as much as possible and trying to make things as safe as possible and stopping the opponent from scoring in order to require fewer goals to win games. But I do think that approach probably makes it more likely for variance to then bite you on the arse when it goes wrong, because when you reduce the amount of goals in games, that's when we've seen it with Arsenal, right? Those games where they've not managed to score goals have generally been the games when they. I mean, this is the Michael Owen quote, isn't it? Where it's like, to win you've got to score goals or something like that. I can't remember, but I do think that you could argue that Arteta has maybe been a victim of his own approach to an extent. But I also do agree with you that like that team deserved more in the last 3-year period, and maybe what we're seeing with Arsenal is a bit of elite teams tend to have like this 3-year cycle for squads, and it feels as though they've gone through that 3-year cycle without necessarily getting the rewards for what they should have had. I guess the big question now is what does the next 3-year cycle look like? How do they rebuild their squad, given that we're seeing key players getting injured and maybe dropping off? And I think for Jurgen Klopp and for Pep Guardiola, generally speaking, they were able to rebuild their squads. And I think the impressive thing with Guardiola was he was able to rebuild their squads without really seeing the decline. I think with Liverpool, you'd get like 3 years decline, 3 years, and whereas with Guardiola, until this season, it's the first time we've seen his team actually decline off. So that's why I'm kind of interested with Arteta now. Like, what does the next phase of his squad building look like?
Not to drag this out too long, but did City not have a bit of a dip in 1920?
Not in terms of the underlying numbers.
Right.
So if you look at the numbers, they actually put up pretty. I mean, that's a season where Liverpool wildly overperformed their expected goals.
And Laporte was missing and Rodri was adapting.
Yeah, and it was a weird season because they fell out of the title race really early on, right? Man City, and then it was sort of like Liverpool cruised home. I hate talking about this because Liverpool fans always view this as you saying that they didn't deserve it. They absolutely deserved to win that season, etc. But I do think that it was one of those weird ones where City weren't actually that bad. It just sort of came out in the wash that Liverpool ended up winning it by miles. But
this is a problem we face now as well, in that because of the way that years work, when you refer to it as 1920, I immediately think you mean
I say Manchester City are out of the title race.
And it's a goal.
That's why I'm
Stanley
thinking,
Matthews runs down the wing, and it's a goal. I love those Pathé film clips where they announce the goal before it's happened. And they're like, oh yeah, there's the goal, I guess. But
Michael Owen quotes. Whoever scores the most goals usually wins the match. When they don't score, they hardly ever win.
Yeah. And he's right.
He is right.
Why are you booing him? He's right.
This one I like. That goes in if he doesn't miss. And if there's rain about, it makes the surface wet.
I think my favourite Michael Owen quote was, I think he was talking about Theo Walcott and said he's quite literally a greyhound.
That's brilliant. And on that note, let's take a break. Wonderful break there, wasn't it? Manchester City 4, Newcastle United 0. But on Saturday, I was in the pub with my friends who I go to watch Crystal Palace with, and I said to one of them, he was putting a bet together, I said, Newcastle will batter City. They'll eat them. They'll be too intense for them. And I was made to look very stupid.
Yes.
Yeah.
And how did that go down? Did they were happy about that?
Well, they put it down as a draw, and I was like, nah, Newcastle will win that.
So
we both looked stupid.
You put them so far to one side that they end up going like, I'll go with the draw then, even though I know City will win.
Maybe, yeah.
It's super hard judging City this season, though, isn't it? It's
yes.
like not least because even when they've been bad, they've generally managed to go ahead in games and then throw away leads. So you just don't know. Like, it seems like is it just the case that in this game they put up more goals than their opponents could actually overcome? So that's why they won.
When you score more goals than the other team, you normally win.
If it had been just like a 2-0 lead or a 1-0 lead, would the Newcastle have scored 2 goals in the last 10 minutes to turn it around? It is tricky to
whenever a player scores a hat-trick in the space of 15 minutes, it always feels a bit like a freak occurrence, you know what I mean?
And there's also like only a window where they can score in that. You know, like again, back to video games, when you get those like power-ups where like your power-up and it lasts for a certain amount of time. You only had that like the time to score that hat-trick.
Marmoush was playing house rules and had every boost.
Yeah, exactly. His boost is only going to last for like 20-minute period. That's quite, I like that idea. So I've only seen like the first half of this, and maybe only half an hour of that, this game. But like I've read what loads of people have said about it, and they all say that Newcastle were awful. I think Alan Shearer said that it was pathetic we were playing. And what I took from it is watching the first half is that City kept the ball so well that they couldn't get onto them. They couldn't press. So the minute they put pressure on it there was an overloaded midfield, so Ederson could just find them with those amazing passes. Is that what happened?
I suppose when you do press like that and it doesn't work, then mentally you start to second guess your pressing. That tears the whole thing apart.
And one part doesn't work, then it's a way through. Yeah.
It's funny because in the pre-match press conference, Pep Guardiola was talking about why things have gone so wrong this season. He said in the past when we've had success, it's when we've had those sequences of 20, 25, 30 passes where we can control games, and we've not been able to do that this season. Now, I've looked into the data, and there's not many situations where teams put up that amount of passes, even including Man City. So I think he is maybe exaggerating for effect. But one of the things that they did well in this game, I think, was control the ball better. Now, there's a couple of things going on because Newcastle were quite aggressive in their pressing, and City are so good in those scenarios where teams try and press them man to man of like exposing weaknesses. So the Chelsea game is a good example of that, right? When Chelsea started going man-to-man against City in the second half, City were then just able to isolate Haaland 1v1, or in this case, it was Haaland and Marmoush in the 1v1 scenario. So the first goal comes from Marmoush against Trippier. Ederson gets the ball, plays it long, and Marmoush comes out with the ball that lobs the keeper. So, that City do have the ability to play direct football and play long when it suits them. When you have a player like Erling Haaland in those isolated 1v1s, and a goalkeeper like Ederson who can put the ball so well onto him, that's a good way of playing. But I think in this game as well, what we saw was that they were just able to control the ball much better in sort of these passing sequences. So I actually had a look at the data, and this was the second highest passes per sequence total for any game against a team in the top half of the table. So they put up over 5 passes on average in their passing sequences, which is interesting because the lowest total they had against a top half side this season was also Newcastle. So it was around 4.1. So they managed to bump it up by over an extra pass, which suggests they were able to control the ball a bit better. And I think for me, a lot of it just came down to having Nico Gonzalez.
I think exactly the same.
We've talked a lot about Rodri and the miss that he's been, but the ability that Nico Gonzalez had to just moderate the tempo of the passing just made life so much easier for City. Interestingly enough, we're talking about in possession stuff, but the really interesting fact from the game is that City didn't concede a big chance in the whole game for the first time this season. And a lot of that, I think, came from the fact they were able to control the tempo better, which meant that, one, they were able to hold the ball for longer, but also when you're able to tempo your build up a bit more, you are able to get yourself into these nice structures where you can then counter press if you lose the ball. It just makes it so much easier for you to win the ball back once you lose it. And so there's a few nice examples from the game of City actually losing the ball, but then being so well positioned, good access to the ball to be able to win it back. And then
specifically Nico as well. Even that first half, there's so many times where he's just at the right angle. So when the ball is inevitably going to Bumble free, I'll go with Bumble. When it rolls out, he is just within 2 yards, 3 yards to be able to go and get that, or near enough that it puts off an attacker going for it as well. And that bit where they can then recycle, or also just offering the short bounce pass, like the pass that no one ever wants to make in this country at five-a-side, where you play it to someone who's marked, just play it back to me, because it'll make them come out, and then there's space for someone else. Just play it back.
It's so true.
Why does no one do that pass?
It's the most UK thing, right? Of like, once someone's passed you, you're not allowed to pass it back to them. You have to pass it to someone else.
And like, I just play it, like, there's no way out, so I'm going to play it short to you, please give it back, and then they don't, and then you're like, but like, if you just do that, it'll move something else along. And
that's why I mentioned tempo, because I think so much of it is just like, people think, well, if you play the ball back, you're just in the same position, but that's not true, because everything else moves around you. So.
And there was a couple of times when they were going back, and I think Nico was sort of, I'm going to call him Nico because that's what I'm used to him from video games, basically, is what his name is for me.
So we can't call him Pep, but we can call him Nico.
That has been his name. No, but that has been his name.
Interesting.
His name is Nico.
Does he wear Nico on the back of his shirt?
Yeah, well, I think he will.
Nico G.
He wore Nico for Porto and everything, yeah. Okay. But like, lots of Spanish players have like 4 names, and I can't really tell which one is the main one.
They all have 2 surnames, so it can get confusing.
Right, there you go. Right, because
my favourite one is Philip Billing, though, who goes by Philip on his shirt. I just think that's brilliant.
Yeah, that's good.
That's quite good. Yeah. I will call him Billing. I decide. Anyway, so like lots of times when Nico is getting to position to like set up these angles.
Nico? This is Nico Gonzalez.
Nico Gonzalez. Yeah.
It'd be useful to have like some other word after his name to really.
I thought you meant Otamendi. For a second.
Sometimes when Trent Nico Gonzalez was playing, he would get into these positions. So like you set up the angles so that you should always have like depth and width, like a really basic like football coaching drill I was taught when I was learning to do coaching stuff, was just like, you show people how you have to have depth and width in a small box, so you show the differences of what that makes. And Nico Gonzalez, Trent Alexander-Arnold, is always dropping in and out of the depth to make sure that there's a next option, like constantly moving, looking around. That's the stuff that you need to happen. But sometimes they were going backwards to the goalie because there wasn't quite the next pass, and a couple of defenders would like shouting at players up the pitch while you're not there. But then I wondered whether how much of that was actually a ruse to get the ball back, because then you can fire that ball straight in. And because you've got Gundogan and Lewis who are then in that midfield slot, and I don't think generally they play that 3 along the side like that. So like there was 2 pulling players to one side, to the right, say, the right half space. Then the other one would be free on the left. And so same as John, I looked through a tiny bit of data, not the same cool stuff that John has, but like in this game, the player with the most touches in the game was Trent Alexander Nico Gonzalez. Postecoglou. So he had 103 touches. The next nearest player was Ilkay Gundogan on 80. Now, Gundogan's been like the holding player for a lot of games, but he just naturally goes forward and just doesn't. I don't think he thinks of what happens when the ball turns over often. He's like thinking what might happen if the ball goes forward.
Or even if he does, his legs are old.
I don't know. Like I think you can still do it, because like Nico Gonzalez, Trent Alexander-Arnold, Trippier is not as fast as like lots of other players.
Yeah, true.
So like it's all about positioning. You like you can be fast in your head.
Neither is Rodri, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you can be fast in your head. And then against Newcastle, the other game they played, do you say it was?
Yeah, it was the lowest amount of passes per sequence.
The Man City played.
Yeah, against a team in the top half.
And I suppose with their midfield problems since the Rodri injury, like for all of Gundogan and Mateo Kovacic's qualities, like Kovacic is way better dribbler than he is a passer.
Well, he had the most touches in the previous Newcastle game. So like when they had the lowest one, he had 96, which is obviously lower than what. I'm not going to do the joke again, but
but he's just not the same profile, not the same.
But he also just goes forward. It doesn't have the physicality. But I think him and Lewis are two the same. Like you're not scared of them. Like even I'd go into a 50-50 with those in the middle of the pitch. Like obviously they'd win.
Yeah, you get cleaned out, but
I get cleaned out and I'd go to hospital. But they would I would still go into that. Whereas against like the other players, I would not do that because they would clean me out.
Ball carrying, the difference between ball carrying and passing is important here as well, because I think when you carry the ball and move the ball through carrying, the opposition can just respond in the same structure that they are, and the player that's on you chases you. Whereas when you're passing the ball, often it means that you have to change the structure of your defensive approach, right? Because whatever the cliched line is, probably Michael Owen said it somewhere, but you passing the ball is faster than the moving it through carrying, right?
I think there is actually a scene in the Goal movie where Santiago Muñoz is taught that by the manager because he refuses to pass in training, and then the manager is like, Santiago, come here, and then he like boots the ball a mile away and tells him to chase it, and then the lesson is that it moves quicker when you pass than when you dribble.
Yeah. But I think that in these situations, I think that's a good example of why Nico Gonzalez is
dug a hole for ourselves here.
Do you know? I would refer.
I'm glad Joe's not here for this.
Do you think we would refer to Trent Alexander-Arnold differently if his name was just Trent Alexander.
Yeah, I think
Trent
we've had this
Arnold.
conversation.
Yeah,
It's because,
well, it's funny.
His name's
joke
so
someone
long.
did. If
And
his
his
name was
first
Ian,
name-
you wouldn't call him Ian.
No, but his first name sounds like a surname, so it just flows better.
Yeah.
It's fine.
Anyway, yeah. What was I going to say? Oh, I was going. We mentioned on the show recently that with Manchester City, their tactical approach is like so. It has coherence to it, by which I mean like when you do one thing well or badly, it affects the next thing, which makes it either easier or harder to do. And I think that bringing in someone like Nico Gonzalez has obviously made it much easier for them to do certain things. So we're talking there about having much better access in counter pressing, which they can do because they're passing the ball better. So you pass the ball better, it makes it easier for you to defend. Being able to counter-press better means that you have to do fewer of those defensive transitions, which they often result in those big chances. And, you know, we said in the past as well, where, you know, when things are going badly and you can't counter-press well, then your defensive line drops deeper and deeper because they know that those defensive transitions are coming. That opens out more space that you then have to cover to counter-press. So it then becomes easier for them to generate. And so you end up in these horrible cycles of cascading where, you know, if you're doing things badly, everything else gets worse, and it gets worse and worse and worse. Whereas what we saw, I think, in the game yesterday, and we could maybe talk about bringing in someone like Omar Marmoush, bringing someone like Khusanov in as well. And those things then have the opposite effect, which is actually everything starts becoming easier. And like, as you say, no one expected City to win 4-0 in this game, but because a few things changed, everything got easier, and so they were able to get back to a much closer approximation to what we expect from Man City.
So Pep Guardiola football built on a house of cards, is that what I'm saying? No, but Khusanov looked much better. He's another one of these, like you say, beneficiaries of Nico Gonzalez's presence and everything else kind of clicking into gear, right?
He's also had more than 2 days in the country before he played his first game at the elite level. Yeah.
He looked really good. There was a clip doing the rounds where he kind of feints to go backwards towards goal and then turns out the other way, and it looked a lot braver than, you know, his Chelsea debut seemed to really rattle him, as it would anyone. Or maybe that's just his resting face, but, you know.
Well, I mean, we're probably... No, I don't think we even are going too big on Nico Gonzalez like early on. Like, you can sort of see that he'll be in the right positions to make that stuff work. And like the last thing I was going to add on to what you were saying there is like when you dribble with it at five-a-side or in these sorts of games, not only does it mean that the defense can push up on you in their same structure, it also like you're reducing the space. Like if you're dribbling, you should be dribbling through an avenue that you can get through to beat a line of pressure, I think. Or you should do it to create space to then pass to someone else.
Exploit space that is there, right?
Exactly, right.
That's the big Andoni Areola thing. It's like if there's space there, positional play generally dictates you don't access the space unless you pass to someone else who's there.
Yeah.
But Areola was like, sometimes the space is just there and you can dribble into it.
And the perfect thing is to have the exact perfect mixture of that, obviously, if you can do both.
Yeah.
But then there's the whole point, like what Guardiola, I think, has done forever. And I remember, like, I've seen it referenced somewhere, like the Barcelona final against Man United when they just passed them to death and like they just couldn't get close to it.
Yeah.
So Newcastle can get close to City here because they just pass. And it means you can't work out where to go next because when you push one way, it's going to go somewhere else and then back to someone else because you can create space for people to go into by passing it rather than dribbling it. But then, like we say, if you can just burst past it, that's when Kovacic becomes an amazing player because he can just turn on on the spot, go through lines, and then suddenly everyone else is there because you don't know what to predict.
But I think in that build-up phase, it's so much more important to have someone like Nico Gonzalez in the Man City system, just because there's a couple of things that stand out for me. One of which is he has that thing that Rodri has where the ball arrives at his feet in pressured scenarios, and he has the ability to go either way. And I think people...
For the first touch?
Even just holding the ball in front of him, he has the ability to go one way or the other, which I think is super important because it allows you to be way more open. It puts pressure on the opposition to... The problem, I think, with Kovacic is you know that he's always going to just try and dribble into the space, so you can anticipate that, and then you can start... defending
as they run a certain way, right? Yeah.
Whereas when you get Rodri, Nico Gonzalez, what they're doing is they're receiving the ball to feet. They can go either way, and it means that the press stops, and they can't commit because they don't know which way you're going to go. And I think when you watch the game back, there's so many scenarios where he gets the ball. He can either move it on quickly if he's under pressure, or he can stand there, wait for the pressure and go either way, and it just gives you so much more flexibility. Yeah. You can then find the side where it's better for you to build up on, and it just makes a huge difference. And I don't think they've had that with Rodri being absent.
I totally agree. He's also, I noticed this from the half an hour watch, he's either one or two touch almost always, and then, like that again helps with tempo. Like one touch to draw them in, two to take it away, and then everyone else follows suit, and then you can get the tempo going with that.
He's a La Masia kid, right? So, and I think that's kind of interesting because it took Rodri a whole season to sort of acclimatise to City, right? Whereas it did feel off the back of that game that Nico just sort of knew what he was doing from the off, and it sort of meant that there's maybe a bit of acceleration.
I think his debut for Barcelona came on as a substitute for Busquets.
When there was hope that Barca may have a midfield of Nico, Gonzalez.
He was playing, but it's when
Petri
they had
and Gavi.
Yeah, they just had no money, so they sold him on. I think Porto got him.
Yeah, after a loan at Valencia. That did always interest me about Rodri though, that because he was really good at Villarreal, but they played kind of like a 4-4-2 underdoggy football. But he clearly had like the profile of that elite six. But then he went to Atletico Madrid for 1 year, was it, under Simeone, and then immediately switched from Simeone to Guardiola. And I think he may be the only. Well, Alvarez has now done the opposite, but that's like quite a weird switch, isn't it? In terms of style.
Yeah, I guess so. I think it's impressive that they sort of, what they've done with those two players is identify guys who are playing in two-man midfields or double pivots and then use them as single pivots. I think there's a lot of people who were saying, Nico Gonzalez not played as a single pivot, will it work? So clearly City are pretty good at identifying the kind of player who maybe...
Yeah, Guardiola probably knows when he watches it, doesn't he?
Yeah, I think so. And like when I was when the news broke and I did some of my scouting, I was sort of watching with an eye to being like, how similar is this player to Rodri? Because the big question is going to be like, what are they going to do when Rodri comes back? And, to be honest, I think they'll probably just play the two of them together. But
I think they can. And both are also... forget how good Rodri is going forward now as well.
Yeah.
And Nico Gonzalez also, you can play him as maybe not a 10, but he likes to attack the box as well.
And it's just good for them to have another one who can do that job.
Yes.
So that Rodri doesn't get run into the ground again,
Absolutely.
Were we surprised at how bad Newcastle were, or did they just catch City at a bad time?
I think it was, what I said before, just passing them, they can't get close to it. It makes you look bad as a team if you can't get close to pressurise them. It's just really hard. You could go full-on man-to-man and follow them everywhere, but you don't really want to...
did that a bit and it didn't really work out. I always think that... I don't know, I always think that if you do that against City and then...
I was going to say, we don't want to do that against City.
Because we're talking about City being able to control the ball a bit more, but like in that game they went direct so many times because there were so many situations where they managed to get like the two centre-backs isolated with the two Marmoush and Haaland, and City are just they're going to take that, right? Because the press... Newcastle had one of the best presses in the world. It's a risk to try and build up through that. If you can go direct and get into these more attacking scenarios, then you're onto a winner.
I really like the look of Marmoush. He adds such a new dimension that they've been missing.
He's really good.
Those runs where he comes from the wing through the middle. Yeah.
Have you seen that? Is it Mido who's on Twitter who keeps tweeting Spurs like, please sign Mo Salah. He's really good. Don't sign Lamella.
It's just Mido trying to flog every good Egyptian player to top.
Yeah, I don't know why I hear him as that voice because it sounds like he's like, please.
You made him sound Scandinavian.
Yeah, but then and they're like they ignore him. He's like, and he's like because it's just Egyptian players, right? He's Egyptian, so he's obviously seen this guy play. Please. Don't.
To go to the data again, one of the things I noticed from City is that like this season they've not been making runs behind in build up much at all, which is something they've done a lot in the past. So using players running in behind to create space in the middle. So you either find the player in behind or you have more space to possess the ball in the middle. Back, right? They've not been able to do that as much this season because they're scared of emptying out the middle, because if they lose the ball, then they can't counter press. So again, we're talking about that coherence and that cascade effect. And I think having someone like Marmoush has meant that they're now making those runs in behind a lot more, creates a lot more space for them, makes it easy for them to possess the ball as well. So it's just all of these little domino effects that you're talking about all over the place.
I feel like I need to put in context for what my voice that I really liked was for, because people might not also spend time on the internet or X or whatever, So I'm calling that X now apparently. So they
Twitter.
Well, probably will be. So Midu keeps like tweeting Spurs or tweeting like that Spurs should be buying these players. He's told them to buy Mo Salah. They always didn't listen because I don't know. Maybe they're not on Twitter.
Was that back in
the day before he signed for Liverpool?
It was last week. Yeah.
Fiorentina or something. Yeah, last week. Yeah, I found this guy. He's really good. Hey, you guys. And then now, obviously, when he was absolutely flying at Eintracht Frankfurt, he recommended him also, but then has not managed to get his message across. So there you go. That's why I did the thing. That's why
clearly got
I think
a good
it works
eye.
a bit. Yeah.
Let's play the Midway Game.
The Mido game.
So Mark won last week, didn't he?
He did win, yeah. He got it.
So we started again, and nobody won this week.
It would have been awkward if someone had won this week.
Yeah, then we would have had to start it all again. Yeah. Tottenham played Manchester United this weekend as well. Tottenham won 1-0, and it was utterly awful to watch. I missed the first half because I was in transit, but I streamed this. I legally watched the second half, and it felt like watching extra time in an international tournament where everyone is knackered and counterattacks take an age to build, and there's just this ocean of space in the middle of the pitch, and it made for a very uninspiring product.
I didn't really understand what was going on. I know there's some chat that in the first half there was players out of position from Man United. I don't know how that could have happened and what Ruben Amorim's...
Mazraoui played as an outside centre-back, which he's done before.
He's meant to go into midfield to mark. Is that what it was?
I don't know. Xerxes played as a right-sided forward because of Ahmad's injury.
But I think it's more that what he wanted them to do they weren't doing, because they were constantly playing through the middle of them, but also United had no midfield.
Casemiro had to
Casemiro
play
on his own, who was also getting dragged either too high up or too deep. He doesn't want to do either of those things. He wants to stay static and protect the zone. And Fernandes, I don't know what... He was doing both things
because
as well.
Spurs play with inverting fullbacks, I suspect that they had some plan to mitigate what was happening. And I wonder whether or not it was just because I think Garnacho was dropping into midfield quite a bit, just tracking.
Wouldn't that be?
Porro.
It would surely be Xerxes and Garnacho who would track the wing backs, though, wouldn't it?
I mean, it depends how you want to deal with it, I suppose. But I would say that in the last few weeks, or last few months even, Spurs have been much more likely to keep the left back deeper. And have Porro sort of on the second line of build-up.
Yeah.
But they did. Yeah, in the first half they had a bit more. Spurs had a bit more control of the ball, and therefore it sort of felt a little bit more like a regular Spurs game. But yeah, in the second half, it just sort of completely fell apart, and it just felt like ball carrying all over the place. Like a player would pick the ball up, run into someone,
get tired,
generally.
Get tackled.
Get tackled or pass to the opponent, and then it would happen the other way around again. It felt very much like a game where both teams were just desperate to not lose, really, and they're obviously at very weird points in their cycles and obviously very different.
Do you know what it felt like? But you know when you're playing like the old FIFAs or EA whatever now, and you put all the teams onto all-out attack. And then the formations make no sense.
Yeah, when you switch to an attacking mode and they just move the right back to left wing, you're like, no, that's not what I meant.
What's going on? But it's more fun because they're like, weird stuff going on.
But that's why transitional football, like a lot of control coaches just hate it, because you just never get the chance to reassess where you're at. And so it just, everything falls to pieces, and then you don't get any of the sort of positional advantages you generally get in games. And so it then becomes, how good is my player in the moment going to be to solve the problems as they go? And they're, as you've said, knackered. And also everything's chaotic. And the general consensus, I think, was that there was no problem solving going on, and it just sort of devolved into a back and forth. So
that being said, United could have scored in this game on several occasions.
Got a few, yeah. There was weird chances they were creating as well.
Of players to have had 10 plus big chances in the Premier League this season, Opta-Joe tweet, Alejandro Garnacho has the lowest conversion rate. He scored 2 of 14.
Yeah, there's a standout instance of a chance where he should have hit the target at least. That was the sort of big chance that...
He doesn't really bobble either. I think he just leans back, his foot's open, he's putting too much beneath it or something.
Yeah, it was kind of weird, wasn't it?
He knows how to hit a football. It's so weird. Like, if you give him... I bet in the warm-up, he was smashing those every time.
It's one of those ones as well where you don't... Like most Premier League players, I think, they just sort of roll it into the far corner. They put a bit of curve in it. You aim for the inside of the post, put a bit of curve in it, and just roll it in. And he just sort of went for the sort of like top corner curler.
Speaking of those, did you see the Aberdeen guy, Toby Keston, scoring from like 30 yards with the same sort of style of finish, but with topspin on it, so it flies in? I'll show you after. It's amazing.
There was Stoke City had their own half goal.
Oh, Lewis Baker.
Lewis Baker.
No way.
Scored from his own half, so apparently better than Charlie Adams.
So. Or Xabi Alonso against Newcastle back in the day.
Yes.
Don't see many of those anymore, though, do you?
I feel like I've seen quite a few halfway line goals recently.
Maybe.
PC gone mad.
Didn't someone try one? Oh, Leighton Orient scored one almost against City.
Yeah, it's a shame that counted as an OG.
Yeah.
As Wayne Rooney's should have, not the same goal, but post keeper and in. Did
against
Switzerland in Euro 2004, that counts to Rooney's England goal tally, and it's definitely just an own goal that he's been awarded. Johnny Sharples has a long agenda against that goal being given to Wayne Rooney. Points are bad.
Points are bad.
Right, first time I've done this, so bear with me. JJ is now on 119 points.
That's good. Oh, no, it's not, because points are bad. and I have the most.
See, the way that you're supposed to do this is you say, well, JJ's had a terrible week, and then you go through our weeks in terms of points.
Do you want to do it? I can just hand it over to you because
I feel bad. Like I'm trying to work out. So total so this week, JJ's had a terrible week.
That's normal.
He's added 9 points.
Closely
followed by Seb, who was Seb last week.
Mark was Seb last week.
8 points for him, and then joint lead.
That's loads. 8.
Me and Joe. Although I don't know who did the adding up on this, so it could be wrong. But apparently Joe and I both put up 5 points. So JJ, you got the most points, so you are going to have to pick 2 games. I'll give you time to do that.
Thank you.
But yeah, well, let's run through the total. So JJ is, still losing on 119 points, followed by Seb, who's on 114. Actually, we got the points wrong last week. He was on 106 last week for anyone who's counting.
But it's been amended.
It is now correct.
It is now correct. I am then second from top on 102 points, and Joe, unfortunately, Joe 1-1 Divine is leading the way on 92 points. So he's got a 10-point lead as things stand.
It's a terrible nickname for a boxer.
So, yes.
All right, well, this week we're going to be doing...
Hang on, guys. Let's have the results from last week, shall we?
Yeah,
a breakdown of the results, please.
Last week, it was the games were Billericay Town versus Lewis, and Tottenham Hotspur versus Manchester United. Joe's 1-1 shouts for Manchester United. Tottenham Hotspur came out quite good. So he got only 1 point on that. But everyone, in all of the other games, everyone got it bad. Like 4-2, no one got it anywhere near. So who did the best?
JJ actually did. Because I said 5-0.
You did. The spirit of the game came through for you there.
Because an entire team against one boy seems unfair.
Poor old Lewis.
Poor Lewis.
Rico Lewis. He had another game to play as well.
Yeah. Unfair.
Guessing 4-3 for Tottenham Man United less.
I think it could have been easily. If Hoyland wasn't shooting directly at the keeper...
It could have been.
Yeah.
If anything, you've been let down by the players.
If anything, they've let me down again.
Yeah, let's see what games have you got.
All right, so Real Madrid versus Man City on Wednesday.
The second leg.
And then Aberdeen versus Kilmarnock on the Saturday.
Aberdeen won at the weekend.
We did, yes.
They turned around their terrible
first win in about 14 games.
But you're still third in the table or something, which is...
Correct. So
I don't really understand that.
The last time Aberdeen won a game was November 9th. I was there at Pittodrie for a 4-1 win over Dundee. And
since then,
on Saturday, we beat Dundee. I can't remember the score.
What a ridiculous league.
I know.
Okay, so Real Madrid are at home, are they, JJ?
They are at home, yes.
Lovely, against Manchester City.
The first leg was 3-2. Yeah.
Okay, lovely stuff. So this week, Ruben, you be Joe.
I'm Joe.
JJ be yourself. John be yourself. And because there's literally no one else here, I will be Seb.
Okie doke.
Oh.
This is fun.
Finally, Steve gets to play the game.
Right, so
who goes first?
Here, what do we do it? Do we do it in order of who?
Why don't we do it? I've got my notepad here. So Ruben, Joe, you give us yours. Real Madrid, Manchester City at the Bernabeu.
Real Madrid versus Manchester City. Bernabeu, Real Madrid with a lead. City looking better. Ooh, let's go. Let's go 2-2.
Ooh.
2-2 for
That's
Ruben.
That's not
Joe.
what Joe would have picked. That's all I'm going to say.
I know, but
I know what he would have picked.
Part of me wants you to completely sabotage this. Lovely. JJ, Real Madrid, Manchester City, bearing in mind that 2-2 is now gone as a score.
3-3.
Lovely.
I want 2-2.
Lovely. That's 3-3 for JJ. John?
1-1.
coward.
Actually, I'm going to go back. I'm going to go 3-2 to City. That's what I want.
Ooh, 3-2 to City.
After 90 minutes, and then
Yeah,
whatever.
exactly. Cup competitions, we just take the 90 minute score.
Yeah.
And I, on Seb's behalf, will go for, I think this is going to be a Real 2-1 victory.
Okay.
Interesting.
Okay. Next up, Aberdeen at home, Pittodrie.
Yeah.
Against Kilmarnock.
Yeah.
Ruben, Joe.
Kilmarnock are 7th, so I'm going to go for a 5-1 win for Aberdeen.
That sounds like something Joe would say.
Yeah.
That's good.
Well,
Okay,
I'm trying to beat him, but also sabotage his...
That's good. If you'd like any... that is unfair on Joe.
That's right. All right.
Yeah.
I don't want to get sacked, so I will rephrase that to a 2-1 win to Aberdeen. I know
Okay,
he would
that's
go
fine.
1-1, but...
That's fine. 2-1, Aberdeen. So Aberdeen will win 2-1 against Kilmarnock, according to Ruben playing as Joe. JJ.
I think Aberdeen will win 2-0.
2-0. So 2-1 and 2-0. Both victories for Aberdeen are gone. John.
I think Aberdeen will win 1-0.
Okay. Lovely stuff.
We're back.
And I've really been backed into a corner with this one. So I'm going to upset JJ and say 1-0 away win for Kilmarnock.
It's the most likely score.
Okay, there we go. So we are done.
Wow. Oh, intro.
Wonderful.
Do we not need to outro?
Oh, yeah.
Done specifically for points or bad. Sorry, I should have been a bit clearer.
Well, thanks for taking that off my mantle, John. Much
Well,
appreciated.
Steve-O stepped in and did the duty.
How many different people will play different people in this game this season? That's fun.
Does someone...
And do we get a medal? You know how like Richie Delac got two medals one year?
Oh, yeah, that's a good question.
Yeah.
I think so.
I want a medal if Joe wins.
He's going to win, I'm afraid. The 1-1s are inevitable.
Anyway, I think that's all we've got time for this week. So I leave you by saying thank you, JJ Bull.
Yes.
Thank you, John Mackenzie.
Yes.
Thank you, Steve, in the booth.
You're most welcome. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ruben.
Yes,
thanks,
thanks, Ruben,
you
for hosting. Yes.
Oh, Thank you very much. It's always a pleasure. And thank you for watching or listening. Bye-bye.